administration or regime because he has centralized the power, much of which is in the 7 working group Politburo members. And also he has taken an active role in many major decision-making processes, including handpicking the new leaders in China. And these new leaders, as you know, will be comparatively young in age, which means their influence will be there for some time to come.
Since taking office in 2012, Xi has consolidated his power to become the party's core leader, enforced through ambitious policies in his first term. An anti-poverty campaign is said to have changed the lives of as many as 55 million people. And his $27 trillion One Belt One Road initiative is reshaping China's trade route with the world. But Xi's most controversial and far-reaching effort was his anti-corruption crackdown. Last week, the country's top anti-graft watchdog revealed over 47,000 officials were disciplined just in the first 9 months of this year. One big question is whether Xi will keep anti-corruption boss Wang Qishan on the power apex beyond the unofficial retirement age. And all eyes will be on who he will pick to be the new economic architects of China. Above all, the gathering may shed light on whether there will be a successor to Xi's throne, or will he lay foundations for a third term. Few would argue that Xi Jinping is the most powerful leader for China in a long time. But the question is, what will he do with all that power? In the next few days, we are expected to see some major decisions made, which will give us indications on what he has planned for China's new economic, social, and military policies. What we do know now for sure is that the developments at this party congress will set the course for China for many years to come.
And that was Sandy Huang speaking to us from Beijing earlier on. And meanwhile, the president also spoke about Hong Kong, and there are signs Beijing is taking a firmer hand with the city, with Xi Jinping noting the importance of tightly grabbing hold of the full control it has over both Hong Kong and Macau, that authority based on the Chinese constitution and the basic laws. The president insisted the one country, two systems policy will be implemented accurately to ensure prosperity and stability in both areas. One point to note is Xi didn't mention some key phrases found in former presidents' Congress speeches, such as respecting the differences of the two systems. Top officials were quick to play down concerns over Xi's speech.
Beijing has all along placed great emphasis on the one country, two systems policy, and the country has the right to exercise full control over Hong Kong, but it just hasn't made it clear in the past. That's why maybe Hong Kongers aren't used to this fact.
Local news now, and a 22-year-old Zambian woman has been arrested over the death of a newborn baby. The infant was found abandoned next to a rubbish bin in Wan Chai. A passerby spotted the baby girl on Hennessy Road around 7:30 this morning. She was in a box next to the bin, and a nearby newspaper vendor says her umbilical cord was still attached. Paramedics rushed the infant to hospital, but she was pronounced dead shortly after. Police are trying to find out why the baby was abandoned. Two Chinese men have been charged by U.S. authorities accused of selling a highly addictive opioid to Americans over the internet. It's alleged that Xiaobing Yan and Jian Zheng are the kingpins of an online trafficking ring, which manufactured and shipped large doses of fentanyl to the States. The synthetic painkillers thought to be responsible for about 20,000 deaths across the U.S. Now, while the men have been indicted, they're both in China. U.S. authorities are hoping their Chinese counterparts will help with their extradition, although the two countries do not have a formal extradition treaty.
I know if it were the other way around, if tens of thousands of Chinese nationals were dying as a result of poison shipped from the United States, we'd be very proactive. And so we're hoping to get the same kind of response from them. So with regard to these particular defendants, we have no extradition treaty with China, but we are optimistic and hopeful that the Chinese will take appropriate action to make sure that they're held accountable.
In other news now, the war against Islamic State has taken a significant turn. US-backed rebels have driven ISIS out of its self-proclaimed Syrian capital, Raqqa. Emily Wither explains why this is a drastic development.
Islamic State have lost their Syrian capital, Raqqa. The 4-month battle to take the city back from the militants has come to an end. The SDF, the alliance of Kurdish and Arab militias, say they're clearing the city's stadium of mines and any remaining hiding fighters. Raqqa's stadium and hospital became the last major positions held by IS after the departure of some of its fighters on Sunday. Only foreign jihadists remained to mount a last stand. The fall of the city is symbolic of Islamic State's collapsing fortunes in Syria and Iraq and marks the end of their so-called caliphate. Raqqa was the first big city the group captured in early 2014. They used to plan attacks abroad from here and stage euphoric parades through the streets. For a time, Western hostages were also held in the city before they were killed in slick propaganda videos. The price of liberation has been high, and many civilians will find they have nothing to return home to. The city is largely destroyed, littered with booby traps and bodies. Islamic State once passed laws from here and issued passports and money. This is where the caliphate began, and more than 3 years later came crumbling down.
In neighboring Iraq, government troops continue to roll through the oil-rich city of Kirkuk in lightning crackdown against the Kurds. They've now taken control of all oil fields operated by a state-owned company. They were previously held by Kurdish security forces, which retreated as the Iraqi army advanced. Iraq took back control of Kirkuk earlier this week in what some say is retaliation against the Kurds, who last month voted for independence. To the latest on the political crisis in Spain now, Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy has urged the Catalan leader to act sensibly 1 day before the region has to decide whether it wants to declare independence. Making his appeal in the national parliament, Rajoy said Carles Puigdemont should renounce an independence bid to head off a threat by Madrid to impose direct rule. This comes after tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets in Barcelona overnight to denounce sedition charges brought by Spain.
Behind bars on Tuesday, the leaders of Catalonia's two main separatist groups, pending trial for sedition as Spain's worst political crisis in decades deepens. They're jailing Monday night, sparking protests and a government walkout on Tuesday. Catalonia is refusing to renounce its symbolic declaration of independence. Madrid has given Catalan leaders until Thursday to do so. So it looks ever more likely that Spain will impose direct rule on the autonomous region. Also under investigation, Catalonia's police chief, accused of failing to order his force to impose a ban on the independence referendum last month. While the two pro-independence leaders are accused of helping to orchestrate protests. The Catalan government accusing Madrid of taking political prisoners. A reminder of life under dictator General Franco, when Catalan culture was suppressed.
All right, coming up next, the latest from the world of business. Well, let's take a look at how markets reacted to the CPC. Here in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng finished the day more or less flat, with investors holding off on making any strong moves while they wait for more details from the Congress. The China Enterprises Index of Hong Kong listed mainland companies did see some decent rises, though, especially in basic material stocks. That mirrored the performance of mainland shares as well, with the Chinese blue chip CSI 300 index hitting its highest level since August 2015. Up in the air, the stakes are being raised as well. The deal announced between Airbus and Bombardier to assemble the Canadian firm's C-Series jets in the U.S. could still face problems. That's according to rival Boeing, who says Bombardier's planes could still face high U.S. import duties. The deal was announced on Monday after Airbus took a majority stake in the troubled C-Series jetliner program. Bombardier is in the thick of a trade dispute with Boeing, who accuses it of receiving state subsidies, leading the U.S. Commerce Department to threaten 300% import duties. From up in the air to underground now, and Rio Tinto looks to have carved itself out a spot of bother. The mining giant has been charged with fraud by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC says Rio Tinto and two of its former bosses inflated the value of coal assets in Mozambique that were bought for $3.7 billion US and sold a few years later for just $50 million US. The UK financial regulator also said yesterday it had reached a settlement with the company over claims it breached accounting rules related to the same assets. Rio Tinto reportedly made misleading public statements over the value of the assets, which the SEC said helped it raise $5.5 billion US from investors. To another dispute on an even bigger scale, and talks over the renegotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement have taken a sour turn. Top US and Canadian officials accused each other of sabotaging efforts to modernize the trade deal. 7 days of talks in Washington ended in acrimony, largely thanks to aggressive US demands on car manufacturing, a 5-year renegotiation clause, and Canada's dairy regulations. Talks have been extended until the first quarter of 2018, however. Canada's foreign minister accused Washington of pursuing a, quote, winner-takes-all approach.
We have seen proposals that would turn back the clock on 23 years of predictability, openness, and collaboration under NAFTA. In some cases, these proposals run counter to WTO rules. This is troubling.
Meanwhile, the other revolution in vehicle tech is, of course, electric power. Volvo Cars and its Chinese parent have just unveiled their first Polestar model and plan to invest $760 million in the electric vehicle brand. Here's Laura Frigberg with more.
When the world's biggest car market says it's getting greener, the auto industry, unsurprisingly, goes in the same direction. The Polestar 1 is a prime example, the first in a series of premium hybrids by Volvo and its Chinese owner to be in production by 2019. The four-seater vehicle aims to rival other green industry players like Tesla and Mercedes. Its 600 horsepower output can propel the car from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in under 4 seconds. It's also available to be bought for 1 to 3 year subscriptions, a sign the industry is getting up to speed with changing car ownership habits, but perhaps not with stagnating incomes.
That there's a certain percentage of electric cars that you have to have. On the other hand as well, because it is an attractive offer and an attractive alternative, so this market will be growing.
Volvo is one of many automakers pushing for joint ventures with Chinese firms. Since Beijing announced by 2025, electric and hybrids must make up 1/5 of auto sales. And there's no sign of that slowing down either. Vehicle sales across China rose in September for a 4th straight month in a row.
All right, time for a short break now, but when we return, making an appearance by popular demand in Berlin, we'll be telling you how the Donald turned up in Germany with not a single hair out of place. Don't go away.
Great news for football fans. View TV will be Hong Kong's sole free-to-air live broadcaster for the upcoming FA Cup season. Watch the thrilling tournaments, all free, live on View TV and View TV6. The return of the Superhero League. The Avengers team up again to restore world peace. Spider-Man, Homecoming. Rent and watch right away with Now TV set-top box. Don't wait, tune into Now Video Express. What's new? Check them out on Now TV channel 106 or call our hotline. In search of baking perfection, the expert judges strolled around streets and alleys in Britain.
This'll blow their socks off.
Extraordinary baking skills, incredible artisan creations.
Beautiful.
Intense baking battles that push each bakery to their limits.